Welcome, sisters and brothers. Welcome to another call to action coming from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and its valuable allies, allies for justice, who are here together tonight because we are again recognizing the 63rd March on Washington. And also tonight, we're recognizing the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act and the 60th anniversary of the Immigration and Naturalization Act. At a very crucial time in America, these various activities are so important to us right now. The very tenure in America is being questioned. But we are here tonight so that we can help to lay down a structure, lay down a strategy, lay down how we are going to fight those in Washington who are trying to disintegrate all that we have done over the years. And so tonight you'll hear from some experts. You hear from people who have been out there and whose words are always there to comfort us, but to call us into action. And so tonight, welcome. And to our various panelists and all that are involved, we welcome you for being here tonight, being with us, and letting your words express themselves in a very humbling but very powerful way. So at this time, it gives me great honor to turn to the person who will lay out our framework, none other than Dr. Milana Karenga. Dr. Karenga is Executive Director of the African American Cultural Center, US, co-chair of Black Community Clergy and Labor Alliance, professor and chair of Africana Studies at Cal State Long Beach, and creator of Kwanzaa and the Nguzo Saba. Dr. Karenga also has two PhDs in political science and in social ethics. But the thing about Dr. Karenga, he's always there in the community with us. And we have done this now for 13 years. And although 13 years, he have been with us in some capacity. I give you now Dr. Milana Karenga.
Thank you so much, Pastor Smart. And I wanted to say to everyone, welcome. Among us, you will always find your family in a peaceful place. And we wish for you blessings without number and all good things without end. And we bear witness as an African people that as our beginning was great and good, so shall our development throughout eternity be, if we dare struggle, speak truth, do justice, and walk in the way of rightness. Hotep, Ashe, hearing. So our topic tonight is marching on Washington, a city under siege, dreams for America and hopes for the world. As we rightfully mark and commemorate one of the defining moments of the Black freedom struggle, the March on Washington, it is important that we remember and recommit ourselves to realize our people's dream for a truly free and democratic America and our hopes for the well-being of the world and all in it. And for God's sake, for the sake of our children, our ancestors, and our own, let us at the outset be honest enough to concede that if we dare to dream and hope beyond the petty, perverse, and oppressive, we must also dare to struggle, dare to serve and sacrifice, and even suffer to ensure that our dreams and hopes come to fruit, life-enhancing fruit, low-hanging fruit, accessible and enjoyable for everyone, everywhere. 58 years ago, we marched on Washington 250,000 strong and in righteous resistance to the savagery of segregation and the pathology of oppression under the banner and battle cry, jobs and freedom. This overarching call to struggle contained within it several interrelated demands, which included dignity affirming jobs and decent wages, affordable and adequate housing, quality and inclusive education, the right and protection of the vote, the end of open and covert discrimination in, quote, federal, state, municipal government by employers, contractors, employment agencies, and trade unions, and legislation to achieve and sustain these gains in goods. No one honest, aware, or even half woke can deny that these demands and needs and issues remain with us today and determine the quality of our lives and the conditions of our health, our well-being, and our capacity to live a good and meaningful life. And the critical question before us is how do we honor
why it's important. This is your
Washington?
second one attending.
Not only
why it's important for you to be here and to encourage and to show the faces of Black immigrants and what they're contributing.
Okay. And the critical question before us is how do we honor the March on Washington? Not only in remembrance, but also in resistance. I said not only in remembrance, but also in resistance. For to make it forever a living tradition, we must choose to act and to continue the struggle to uplift the march, praise its achievements, and actualize its still to be achieved goals and aspirations. To rightfully and meaningfully remember and honor this pivotal moment in Black and U.S. history and its continued significance for the struggle of freedom and justice in the world, then we must constantly ask, what lessons can we draw from it to achieve the good life and world we all want and deserve, and to leave as a worthy legacy for those who come after us? First, it means at a minimum reflecting on and responding rightfully to the fact that the Black freedom struggle, which the March on Washington was a signature expression, is not finished, and therefore it is still essential work for us to do and critical structures for us to wage and win. Secondly, we must put and make permanent the most vulnerable at the center of our interests and efforts. For as taught in our sacred text, we are called by history and heaven to bear witness to truth and to set the scales of justice in their proper place, especially among the voiceless, the vulnerable, the downtrodden and degraded, and the fragile, unfree, and oppressed. It is important also to note here that the march organizers intentionally chose August 28th to march on Washington, for it was the 8th anniversary of the savage lynching of Emmett Till in Mississippi. May the good he left last forever. Without announcing it, they were foregrounding the continuing central issue of racism, both systemic and social, racial hatred, hostility, and violence turned into public policy and socially sanctioned practice. In addition, we must practice operational unity, without uniformity, unity in diversity, and unity in principle, purpose, and rightful practice, bringing all the peoples together and daring to struggle and daring to win and create an expanding realm of human freedom in this country and the world. Also, we think of Dr. Martin Luther King and his stated uplifting dreams and hope for our people at the march. But in drawing more lessons from the march, I want to raise the voice of the legendary labor leader, Nana A. Philip Randolph, who conceived the march with his brilliant main organizer and comrade in struggle, Bayard Rustin, Nana Bayard Rustin, and others named and unnamed. They brought this into fruition by pulling us all together. Nana A. Philip Randolph spoke to critical issues facing us, giving us added direction on the moral map of our struggle, which serve as a framework for the work still to be done and the struggle still to be waged. He asked he asked for those and all of us who would inherit the struggle to understand and assert ourselves as, quote, an advanced guard of a massive moral revolution for jobs and freedom, which, quote, reverberates throughout the land, unquote, and touches every place and space where there is segregation, exploitation, and oppression. He reaffirms that there's a moral dimension to our struggle, a human dimension in which we must care for each other and for people not only in this country, but for around the world. For all of this is about freedom and justice and equality for everyone, which are indispensable to any serious and substantive discourse and practice claiming the name and notion moral. Again, stressing the moral character of our struggle, he states that, quote, we want a free democratic society dedicated to the political, economic, and social advancement of men and women along moral lines, unquote. Moreover, recognizing Black people as a central moral and social vanguard, he asserted that it falls to Black people to assert this proper priority of value, and that we are in the forefront of today's movement for social and racial justice because of the lessons we've learned from our history and our struggle as people. We must open new ways forward, as Nana Dorothy Height, leader of the National Council of Negro Women and co-planner of the march, said. We must strive and struggle ceaselessly to, quote, pry open wide the freedom gates. And we must, unquote, and we must do this so that not only racial and social and economic justice prevail, but also gender justice, clearly an unaddressed issue at the march and needing continuous corrective attention. And also we must add the struggle for global justice for the world itself and all in it. The March on Washington in our time then must not only be massive demonstrations and demands in the street of Washington, but also demonstrations and demands in the street of the whole country, on campuses and in corporate spaces, at work sites and in institutions of every kind. Indeed, the march is a symbol, motto, and message of struggle read rightly must lead us to honor the moral imperative, to continue the struggle, keep the faith, and hold the line. It urges us to realize and respond in rightness and relentless resistance to emerging fascism and the all-out assault on the human, cultural, political, and economic rights of our people, our children, women, immigrants, the elderly, and the ill, and others in this country and around the world. It means embracing Haji Malcolm's teaching that regardless of wherever we are or however we are, quote, living in a country that is a battle line for all of us. And we are living in a world where we must build solidarity to hold those lines and to achieve the freedom and liberation for everyone. Thus we say of us, everywhere, a battle line, every day, a call to struggle. Likewise, in these difficult, dangerous, and demanding times, we must remind ourselves and our allies and others of Nana Paul Robeson's call to struggle during the genocidal and world-injuring rise of fascism in Italy and Germany. It tells us, but especially the privileged people, holed up in their ivory tower, their corporate cave, their fortified communities, and countries of imagined isolation and real illusion, that everyone who loves democracy and who stands for freedom and justice must rise up and resist. And he asked us to have a more concern for all the peoples of the world.
Yes.
For he says and suggests that the erasure in Guernica, Spain then, or the genocide in Gaza, Palestine now, is not a private, provincial, or regional matter, but a highly human one. Indeed, he taught that resistance to genocide, erasure, and emergent fascism, and its favorite food, racism, is not the task of one group of people. For there is here, he said, no standing above the conflict. The battlefront is everywhere. There is no sheltered rear. Nana Phillip wants us to be not only planners and makers of marches, but also a vital part of, quote, the masses in motion for freedom. For he says, quote, the March on Washington is not the climax of our struggle, but a new beginning, not only for Black people, but for all Americans who thirst for freedom and a better life, unquote. And this means we must, quote, return again and again to Washington in ever-growing numbers until total freedom is ours. We should settle, he said, for nothing less. And may God grant that we may have the courage, the strength, and faith in this hour of trial by fire, never to falter, unquote. And this return to Washington, think about it, a return to Washington. It is not only the current city under siege to which we must return, but we must make a constant return to Washington as sites and policies and practices of oppression and exploitation everywhere and on any and every level. And we must dare to end such anti-human, life-diminishing, and future-deforming crime against the targeted people, humanity, in the world. In closing, then, this is our duty, to know our past and honor it, to engage our present and improve it, and to imagine a whole new future, and to forge it in the most ethical, effective, and expansive way. Hotep, Ashe, Hetty. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Karenga. Thank you so much for those opening words and the framework and establishing what we need to do, returning to Washington. Thank you. Thank you so much. As we begin our panel tonight, we are going to ask each panelist is just going to, they've gotten some suggestions from me, what they're going to be, what to talk about around their expertise, because it's very crucial that we hear from them. And then they were going to give us two words on what we need to do. And what we need to do will be incorporated into our plan of action, because that's what time it is. So it's my honor at this time to introduce Attorney Barbara Arnwine. Barbara Arnwine is the president and founder of the Transformative Justice Coalition, co-chair and facilitator of the National Commission for Voter Justice, the Millennial Voter Matters Convening, and the Voting Rights Alliance. She's one of the foremost voices on voting rights in America today. I met her personally when I was a student at Duke, and she had just gotten out of law school there, and she was a part of a group of women that was just making sure us young brothers had the right perspective on things. And I was grateful to that for her all of these years for that. And so at this time, Attorney, help us to understand what's at stake with the Voting Rights Act. Help us to understand what you think are our next steps, and anything else you'd like to give to us.
First of all, thank you so much for having me today. And thank you to all the other panelists. And thank you, Dr. Curren, for that great introduction for all of us. Yes, the March on Washington was 60 plus years ago, and we are now here dealing with a new crisis. Everyone, we are in dangerous times. Mm. They're more dangerous than people imagine. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 is under total attack. I am here tonight, to sound the alarm to you, because the alarm is that anti-democracy forces are doing everything they can to destroy Black political power. Don't get confused. That's one of their goals, and they're here to destroy democracy, period. Mm-hmm. But as Dr. Curren said, racism and fascism always go hand in hand. They are interdependent twins. And it is so important for us to understand that the President of the United States, you have watched him over the last weeks, demanding that Texas give him 5 rigged, racially gerrymandered districts, mm-hmm, so that he can win the 2026 elections. Do you know what that means, folks? That means their internal polling data is telling them that they're going to lose, because the people of this country are disgusted with what's happening. And so in order to avoid that, they're going to artificially structure our elections in such a way that only one party can win. People, that is not democracy. That's what we're up against. He's also issuing all these crazy executive orders, talking about no mail-in ballot, talking about, you can't, that he's going to try to institute the SAVE Act, even though that's only Congress's authority. So he's trying to issue all these evil executive orders. And what you got to understand, and I want you to say this to every person who tells you that he's going to change all these elections by himself through executive order, you need to tell him that he has no such authority. The President of the United States is given no authority under the Constitution to determine the time, manner, and place of elections. None. There's only 2 entities, states and Congress, that can do such a thing. So be very clear about that, because a lot of people are confused. They're like, oh, Barbie, he's taking away. I'm like, no, he can't do it. You got to understand what power resides where, so that you know which power you need to dictate to. So, as he tries to institute this racist dictatorship based on eugenics, If you haven't studied the writings of Curtis Yarvin and his ideology out of Silicon Valley, then you're missing everything. I really argue, and I really urge you to look up Curtis Yarvin. He's still so out there bragging about all his racist theories that they haven't shut him up yet. So you need to see what he's actually saying. But basically, he's saying, inferiority, blah, blah, blah. He teaches that the worst thing that ever happened to the United States was the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And he means that. And they mean to destroy it. So the other thing we're seeing, of course, is an erosion and destruction of the Constitution itself. MAGA state governments are, engaging in just an epidemic of voter suppression. You can go to my website for my organization, the Transformative Justice Coalition. You can go to tjcoalition.org and look at the 72 forms of voter suppression. I'm about to issue a new edition next week that you will see. But if you go there, you're going to find a lot of great information about what's happening. The sad thing is that everything I'm saying to you, 90% of people have no clue. They don't know what's going on. And one of the things that you must know, if I get to say nothing else about this during this whole session tonight, know that there are two major cases before the Supreme Court. Right now, there are two huge cases. They will determine whether or not, by the end of this Supreme Court term in June of next year, whether or not there is a Voting Rights Act. That's how essential those cases are. One is called Louisiana versus Calais, Callais. And in that case, they have, it was argued last term, but they didn't like the argument. So because it was too strong against, these anti-voting rights forces, so they rescheduled it for this term, and they changed the whole question before the court. It went from whether or not, Louisiana had to be forced to have a second minority district to whether or not majority districts are unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment. And if you saw the articles from today's brief filing, because they filed all these briefs yesterday in this case, you will see that Louisiana actually said not only are minority districts unconstitutional, but they also said the whole Voting Rights Act is unconstitutional. So in other words, people of color have no voting rights as far as they're concerned, and that the act should not continue to exist. So this is a huge case, because if they win, one half of the existing 62 members, one half of the existing Congressional Black Caucus disappears. Think about it. A whole lot of the Latino Hispanic caucus disappears. Think about it. Folks, that's what's at stake. The second case is even worse. But let me also mention that the Calais case will be argued on October the 15th, because they expedited the argument. And the court, is just coming back that first Monday in October. But they're going to they want to, prioritize getting rid of our voting rights. So they're going to prioritize the Louisiana versus Calais case for argument on October 15th. So we will be out there. Now, if you want something to do, come join us, because we are organizing the Transformative Justice Coalition along with other organizations. We're organizing the protests that will be held at the Supreme Court. The second case is Turtle Mountain versus Howe. Yes, it's called Turtle, like, the turtle that, scamperers around the ground. It's like the animal turtle. They want to, the Turtle Mountain Band is one of the many Native American tribes nations that are involved in this case. And it's Turtle Mountain versus Howe, Howe. It's an evil case. I mean, nothing but evil, out of the 8th Circuit, wherein the 8th Circuit has held that there is no private right of action under the racial discrimination provisions of the Voting Rights Act for anyone to bring a case. So if you go to vote and somebody calls you the N-word to your face and says they're not going to give you a ballot, you cannot, in the following states right now: Iowa, Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, Arkansas, Missouri, and Nebraska, you can't file a lawsuit under the Voting Rights Act. You have to go under the Constitution or some other argument, but you can't file it under the Voting Rights Act nor Section 1983 of the Civil Rights Statutes. So they have gone all in, and they said the only entity in the United States that can bring a case under the Voting Rights Act is the U.S. Department of Justice.
Oh, boy.
Are you kidding me? Come on, folks.
Oh, boy.
Let's be very clear. 90%, historically, it doesn't matter who's president, 90% of every case that has ever been brought under the Voting Rights Act has been brought by private parties. The Justice Department has only brought 8% of all those cases, even under the best administrations. So I don't want us to be clear I want us to be so clear that if that becomes the law of the land, if the Supreme Court decides that the Eighth Circuit is correct, then none of us can file any cases under the Voting Rights Act. And as you know, if you're into eugenics, you hate the disabled, right? You hate anybody who's not, quote, Aryan, all the rest of the madness. And so you hate the disabled. This same circuit just decided in August of this year, yes, this month, they just decided that you also have no rights, private right of action, if you are disabled and you want to complain about the lack of disability assets, the lack of disability machines, you can't complain. So people, this is serious. What can you do about it? First of all, I started off by saying 90% of people have no clue what I just talked about. They have no idea these cases exist. I need you to become a walking, talking, massive public education machine. I need you can follow me, of course, on social media, because I'm talking about these issues all the time, and I'm in most of the social media platforms. You can also join us on September the 11th. We're going to be virtual at 4:00 Eastern time, 1:00 your time, because, I'm a native Californian girl, Los Angeles, good old Angelino. And I want everybody to know that you can join us by going to our website and you're signing up, or you can email jdockens, DOCKENS, at tjcoalition.org. We have work to do. We're not going to sit back and allow them to destroy our voting rights. Too many people paid too much. So I'm also organizing. And so if you know any people who were foot soldiers, who stood on that Edmund Pettus Bridge in 1965, we are doing a special brief for them. So if you know of them, put them in touch with me. I need to talk with them. Again, you can find me, all over social media. Last point, and the last thing is, just like Dr. Karenga says that, we all have our, March on Washington. People, we all have to cross our Edmund Pettus bridges. And right now, everything that the ancestors sacrificed for to make our voting rights possible is under attack. We got to hold the line. This is our moment. We're called in this moment to be engaged in this battle. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Attorney Arnwine, for your message and the teaching. The teaching is so exciting. and SCLC is a part of that coalition, and so
Yes.
we will make sure that we get the information to you also once if you're not on that meeting on the 11th at 4 o'clock on the 4th at 11 o'clock. I'm
The
sorry.
11th at 4 o'clock. The
Yes.
11th.
Okay. 11th. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. You've been wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Pamela Anchang. Sister Pamela she is the, let me get her, I just moved it around here. She is the editor of the Immigrant Magazine, and she's a force in our community. And she and her husband work hard on African and people of the diaspora issues. Pam is award-winning journalist, media advisory, and founder of the Immigrant Magazine, where she serves as the president and managing editor. She she knows the knowledge, she has the ability. She tells us all the time what we need to be doing. And she's working on a special project now also. But in the meantime, Sister Pamela, come on. And I talked to you, one of the things I talked to you about is the whole idea that people sometimes think there's only one group of immigrants, and we have to make sure that they understand the diaspora and all this going on. So tell me how you think the Immigration and Naturalization Act is affecting those and what we can do.
Wow. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I'm so honored to be in the presence of all the greatness in this room. Just FYI, I'm actually currently in New York. So I'm coming to you from New York and I'm attending a summit called Africa's Brain Drain, which is just so coincidental with what we're doing tonight. I had to steal myself away just to be here because
Thank
I
you.
love both. I love both. I love what I'm doing here, stopping Africa's brain drain. And I see the synergy with that and what you are doing, Reverend Smart. So, where do I begin? Here at Africa's Brain Drain, we are talking about how we can build a repository for Africa's intellect and talent, which is exactly what you are doing. As founder of the Immigrant Magazine, I consider myself a servant because, like you have said, every time we talk about immigration, most people think of one type of immigrant, and they forget about people that look like me. However, the Immigrant Magazine does not discriminate. We address the issues of all immigrants. But as a woman of African descent, I can tell you this. The diaspora has approximately 350 million Black people, that's immigrants, Black people, people of African descent. And when you think about that number, it beats the population of the United States, it beats the population of Brazil. And we think about the contributions of that group to the economies wherever they find themselves, it's unmeasurable. And yet, when you look at our continent, the continent of Africa, it languishes. Why is that? Why are we unable to come together and stand up with pride looking at our contributions? Our contributions are literally in the billions globally, but we struggle. And now we see what's going on now here in the United States. Black immigrants are the most affected by what is going on with the new administration. People like me worry. We worry about speaking up. We worry about engaging. We worry about visas being taken from our children. We worry about our naturalization being yanked away. We worry about permanent residents unable now to go back home, or who happen to be back home and they're worried about coming back in. And of course, as people of African descent, we unfortunately do not have our own lobbying arm or activism and advocacy for ourselves. At this Africa's Brain Drain Summit, we have been talking about a call to action. what can we do to stop this? Now, you talked about me engaging in many different things. I am actually on a course to try to see how we can empower ourselves. And so I decided now to wear another hat, which is to leverage the power of artificial intelligence to make it possible for us to succeed wherever we may be. It's my mission now, together with what I do for the Immigrant Magazine, which is to connect brands to our 350 million diasporans, to see the power of our dollar, to see the power of our resources. And so, in doing so, I need to also empower our community to empower itself. Some people have said AI is the new revolution, is the new equalizer. And so, the message that I really want to bring home to us today is that beyond telling stories, it's important that we also meet the changes of the new revolution that has befallen us. I don't want to see our people left behind. I don't want us to keep complaining and having activism conversations and all whatnot, but to actually pick up the mantle and seize the opportunity. And so at the Immigrant Magazine and our business arm, which is called Immi Media, we are now on a mission to educate and empower our communities with AI knowledge. Not to be scared of AI, but to look at AI as a tool that is leveling the playing field. It does not discriminate based on our race. It does not discriminate based on our accent. It does not discriminate in any way, shape, or form. Yes, there are intrinsic biases because of who has written, who the people that own these platforms. However, there are ways to tweak it and make it work for you. And so I don't want to take up too much time tonight. I just hope that as we have this conversation tonight on these panels, that we will not only focus on talking about the past or talking about what's going on or talking about how powerful we are, but that we actually have call to actions for everything that we talk about, that we support each other's initiatives, we support each other's visions, we support each other's businesses, we support our children, that we don't only go out and march for one type of immigrant or Black immigrant, but for all. Right now, we are all faced. I was speaking to an African American sister who is a Pan-Africanist, and I said I was worried about myself because I'm an immigrant. And she said to me, do you know that we as African Americans, we really don't have, she said something to the effect of being African American is not guaranteed your naturalization either. And I was taken aback, but I know she was saying it within context of the history of enslavement of our people. And that history is connected directly with me as a descendant of African ancestry. So how do we come together collectively to make ourselves empowered financially and also in our mindsets? So my call to action is that we today pledge to support one another and to take action in many ways, not just by talking, but actually doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sister Pam. Thank you for your work that you do, and thank you for your insight. We at this time, as we were talking about immigration and with naturalization, I want to move to to Attorney Do Kim, and ask him because we often forget that the perspective from Asians, and one of the things our table is very inclusive. And Dr. Kim is the founder and president of the KW Lee Center for Leadership, a nonprofit dedicated to providing Koreatown youth with their tools and opportunities to become future leaders, and is also a civil rights attorney. And he's another one that has been with us on this quest for 13 years. He has worked with us during this March on Washington events and the ones that are surrounding it. So, Attorney Kim, I turn to you and ask you first, what has been some of the struggles of your family, your history, your people, and also how does that relate to your understanding of also the natural immigration and naturalization?
Great. Thank you so much, Pastor Smart, for inviting me today. It's a pleasure to be on the panel with so many distinguished guest speakers here. Um, the Immigration and Nationality Act is something that's very important, I think, to all of us, but I think especially for the Asian American community. Uh, Before 1965, when the Immigration and Nationality Act was enacted, there was a period of approximately 40 years, from 1924 to about 1965, that Asian Americans were not allowed to come to this country because we were considered aliens, ineligible to become citizens. And so you can see those 40 years where Asian Americans were excluded from this country. Of course, most people know that Chinese Americans were the first excluded group back in 1884. But for those 40 years in 1924 to 1965, pretty much all the Asians were excluded from coming to this country. And I think that really kind of changed some of the generational issues within our community because we had Asian Americans here already before 1924. Even in Los Angeles, we had Korean Americans that were living in South Los Angeles, close to USC at the time, because at that time, uh, uh, they were racially restrictive covenants that only allowed you to sell these homes to persons who were not of the Caucasian race. So all of those homes were not able to be bought by Asian Americans at that time. So we actually lived in South LA, close to USC. That's where the Koreatown first started. And I think a lot of folks know that the Japanese American community, they're also living in South Los Angeles at the time as well too. So we have that type of history from back then. But for my community and for myself, my family came here in 1974, December of 1974. I was 3 years old. Came to the United States with my brother, my parents. I grew up in Koreatown, but my family and so many other Asian Americans were able to come because of the change in 1965. And the change with the Immigration Nationality Act came because of the civil rights movement. In large part, it was the civil rights movement that changed that possibility for us to be here. Because before, a lot of those immigration acts, uh, they preferred Western Europeans to the exclusion of other ethnic groups around the world. And so in 1965, in the wake of the civil rights movement, all those discriminatory practices uh, were done away with. And so now, that's why we have a lot of Asians and Latin Americans that were able to immigrate to this country. So it's really a history lesson for ourselves, and especially for the Asian American community to really understand that we're actually able to be here in this country because of the long struggle that African Americans fought for uh, against racism, against discrimination, against segregation. And I hope that that is something that more and more Asian Americans can learn about. Those are the things that are not taught in school. I think that would be very important uh, for our community to learn about. And so that's been really very impactful for us. I know that we came here under family ties because my uncle was here. He came before. Uh, my uncle actually was a soccer player for the Korean national soccer team, and he came here and he had odd jobs, and he was able to sponsor our family, and that's how we were able to come here to this country. So it had a great impact on my family, along with so many other Asian American immigrants that came. Um, in terms of what I've been seeing recently over the last maybe 4 or 5 years, in terms of our community, I think everybody knows with the pandemic, there was a lot of API hate crimes and incidents that were happening throughout the country. Uh, that was something that was very real for so many APIs. And I think it really affected our community. And I think when I take a look at it historically, it is something that is kind of like a cyclical process in our community where Asians are always seen as foreigners, as a yellow peril. And if not now, it's only a matter of time before they start doing that, before something happens and we're hated again. And so we saw that with Vincent Chin, who was killed by two uh, white white auto workers who thought that he was Japanese and thought that he was taking their jobs away and beat him to a pulp with a baseball bat. And we also have another story here in 1999 in Los Angeles, a Filipino postal worker named Joseph Ileto, and he was shot to death by a white supremacist here in the valley. And you know what he did later on after killing Joseph Ileto? He killed 5 Jewish youth that same day. And so those are the things that I think our community has been dealing with in terms of the racism and stirred discrimination. And, you know, just for myself on a personal level, I think so many Asian Americans, we've all heard things like go back to your country, you don't belong here. I remember a time I was about 21, I was on the East Coast. I think I was in Connecticut at the time, and there was a Jeep, a black Jeep that rode by, and there were 4 white folks inside the Jeep. And they yelled out to me, and they said, "Go back home, you fucking yellow dog." I started looking around thinking, who are they talking to? I guess I'm the only Asian guy there, so they must be talking about me. Uh, but those are the things that you don't forget. And those are the things that happen to Asians, especially for myself, just walking on the street, getting called all kinds of names, uh, you know, things. Yeah, those are the things that I've kind of experienced. And I think a lot of Asian Americans experience as well too. But I will say one thing that I think those are the issues that we've seen for APIs. I know right now there's so much organizing on various issues, not only on API hate crimes, but also about immigration. Uh, I know for our center, our young people, they organized uh, uh, a protest in Koreatown at Liberty Park against the ICE raids. And we invited so many community leaders to come out and speak and to be a part of it. I know we had Nikkei Progressives, we had Latin American organizations come out, we had tenants unions organizations come out. We also had the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. We invited a speaker and they came out as well too. So we're so happy, and they added so much perspective and understanding from the African immigrant community. And we're so glad that they came and supported us as well too. And you know, those are the things that we're trying to do in Koreatown. I think right now the immigration issue is probably one of the most critical issues that I think that we can all work on together. And I think that is the timely issue that has been happening this summer, but I think it's going to continue on. And I hope that we can get together as a beloved community and to work together on that particular issue. We love to work on other issues as well too, as they come up, but I know that that is central to what's going on. And for me, I'm so glad that Barbara talked about those 2 Supreme Court cases, because as she said, many people don't know about them. And those are serious consequential cases that that will roll back so many of the hard-fought victories. That the Voting Rights Act is so critical and so important. It doesn't make sense that you don't have a private right of action to sue under the Voting Rights Act. And I think that those are things that hopefully, if it does, we don't know what will happen at the Supreme Court, but if there things don't go well, obviously there's other things that we can do as people to try to get another law passed or try to work something out. But I think that I'm really glad that she talked a little bit about that, because I think that makes a huge difference. For me, I think I've been part of this beloved community that Pastor Smart and so many other people have been involved with, Dr. Curren and so many others. I really appreciate having the opportunity to build community with all of you. And it's my hope that we can use this crisis, but also an opportunity to bring young people into leadership. Because for me, when I was a young person, I got involved with community organizing in Los Angeles. And I think if I didn't get involved with it at that time, I don't think I'll be doing what I'm doing now. And I think the young people now, this is also their opportunity and their moment, and they're out there on the streets. They're out there organizing. I think we can work with the young people. And I think that by working with them, this is going to be their moment. And this is our opportunity to create the next generation of leaders that are going to continue to help build Los Angeles. And so I hope that we can always continue to do that. And I know with the Young Dreamers for Justice, I think this next Tuesday, we have a workshop to about how to register voters. And I think that's one of the ways that we're going to try to continue to do that. And just wanted to say, again, just thank you so much for inviting me here today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for what you do and all, through the center and through your firm and all of that. Thank you so much and always being a part. Let me move on your commercial you make. So as we move our activities for the next week, one of the big ones is next Tuesday at 7 p.m. There's going to be a Zoom event for young voting registration training, the MLK Young Dreamers for Justice. They'll be all over the country, hopefully. And so you could just look on, just go again to our web, SCLC's Facebook page. It will be on there at 7 o'clock next Tuesday. But there is a flyer. I'll get around to everybody tonight and really try to encourage as many young people as possible to be on that program next Tuesday at 2 o'clock. I mean, at next Tuesday at 7 o'clock. That was so cancel that one out, Patsy. I just sent that to you. Then you make that ad, but we already got it done. Thank you. Okay. So right now, one of the things that happened at the March on Washington was building up to it. There was a lot of unity between the African American community and Jewish community. And throughout the years, there's been this type of unity going on and partnerships at different times. But recently, there's been a lot of static in there, a lot of people on both sides. There are Jewish people that are condemning what Israel is doing. There are Black people that are condemning what Israel is doing in Gaza. And so we really wanted a voice, one that I trust. Over the years, I've trusted because he's been a part of our coalition forever. And I have to just honestly say that when the press or anybody comes to me and says anything about the Jewish community, I first go and I always like to talk to our REA Cohen to get his perspective on it because he's just has a great perspective, a justice perspective on it. And so at this time, let me introduce REA Cohen. He is my friend. He's a rabbi, PhD, and professor of rabbinical literature at the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies, a co-convener of the Black Jewish Justice Alliance that I was one of the founders with him, and a member of the Clergy for Black Lives. He is a past president of the Society of Jewish Ethics and a commissioner of the Los Angeles City Ethics. Aria, I already said it. We've talked about it at different times, but just talk. What's going on, and then again, how can we make it better? How can we fix this thing? You're muted.
Thank you so much, Pastor. It's such an honor to be here, and thank you for your organizing year in, year out. You're always where people need to be. You're always where the action is. Thank you, everybody who's on this panel. It's an honor to be amongst you. So a little talk about, I want to talk a little bit about the Black-Jewish Alliance over the years, and which came out probably most symbolically at the March on Washington. Prior to that, when Rabbi Heschel marched across the Pettus Bridge with Martin Luther King, and also when Schwerner and Goodman were killed along with Cheney during the Freedom Summer, during voter registration. These are kind of highlights, though Jews were disproportionately represented in general amongst whites during the Black Freedom Movement. So I want to talk about it, and some of it has to do how did that come about? Like to think that because the Jewish community has a very well established moral core, but I'm not sure it's totally that. There were a lot of things that came together. Some of it was at the beginning of the 19th century, after the pogroms in Kishinev. There were pogroms all across Eastern Europe. In 1906, a pogrom in Kishinev. A lot of members of the Jewish community, especially those who are in places in organizations of the Jewish community, recognized that the Jim Crow South was very similar to what was going on with pogroms in Eastern Europe, and realized that at the founding of the NAACP, they realized that they should be part of this movement to try to redress some of what was going on, the lynchings in the South, Jim Crow in general, based on their experience. They had traveled, or family members had been in Eastern Europe during the pogroms, and then this was before World War I, but then it got significantly worse after World War I. During World War I, after World War I, there was another series of pogroms, which 50,000 Jews were killed, and then, of course, World War II and the Holocaust. And so Jews following that, Jews were very much part of the Black Freedom movement. At the March on Washington, Rabbi Joachim Prinz, who had been a rabbi in Berlin during the rise of the Nazi regime, he left pretty late, relatively, and gave one of the addresses at the March on Washington, which very few people remember because you don't speak before Martin Luther King and expect to be remembered. But he made the most important thing he said was that the worst crime that happened in Germany during the Nazi era, not only in Germany, was not so much the killing itself, which was heinous and awful, but those people who were silent, and the people who stood aside and were silent. And this echoes things, of course, that King said in a letter from Birmingham jail, that he was not worried about the racists, about the sheriffs and people who were sicking the dogs, but he was really bothered by the white liberals who kept calling for slowing down and what's the urgency, and let's take it slow. And so those two things, I think, were part of what was going on in the Jewish community. The Jewish community was split. The Jewish community was not, even though there were many people in the Jewish community who were part of the freedom movement, there were many people who weren't. And it's kind of symbolic that in the last movement in Memphis and the sanitation workers strike, the union representative who came down to help out with the strike was Jewish. The head of the moderates, the head of the moderates, or the clergy association, was also Jewish, and the mayor of the town, who was totally against civil rights, was also Jewish. He had converted to Episcopalianism, and so Jews were all over the map, especially in the South, especially because there were synagogues that were burned because they showed any sort of support for the civil rights movement, and so there was a lot of fear. But there also was this overlapping of interest. And so after World War II, on the one hand, you had Jews who had escaped from Nazi Europe and got positions at historically Black colleges, Spelman and others, when they couldn't get jobs elsewhere. And they also found then themselves in the odd position of escaping from a place where they were considered subhuman to a place where they had white privilege. And so they tried to use that and tried to negotiate and navigate that during this very troubling period. You also had the GI Bill, which most whites benefited from and blacks did not benefit from, and a lot of Jews started getting into colleges and moving up financially. Most of the folks who were most of the Jews who went down to help out in the Black Freedom Movement were college students, and that was a place where they got to in a large part because of the GI Bill. And then, so during the 60s, there was kind of an overlapping interest where the Jews were on their way up and they were trying to also help out. They saw that there was the same discrimination to some extent that was impacting the Black community was impacting the Jewish community in terms of housing, covenants on housing, where you couldn't sell a house to Blacks or to Jews. Jews weren't allowed to move into certain neighborhoods. Jews couldn't get into certain universities. And that started breaking apart. But then during the 60s, during the end of the 60s, when the Black, after the politics of assassination, put an end to some extent to the Black Freedom Movement in the South, or at least the first stage of the Black Freedom Movement, and a lot of the young Black activists moved towards Black nationalism, a lot of the Jewish activists found themselves kind of homeless because they found themselves kind of being pressured out of the movement, especially with the identification with third world movements and Pan-African movements, and which put them, as young Jewish activists, a lot of them identified with Israel, and with the state of Israel then, especially after the Six-Day War and the Israeli victory. And a lot of the Black activists who are identified with the third world movement were in opposition to the state of Israel, were taking up the Palestinian cause. And so there was tension there. And many Jews also turned inward. There was a return to religion movement. A lot of it was called the Baal Tshuva movement, or those who are the penitents. And so there was a growth of religious Judaism to a certain extent, which took people away from politics and away from, in that way, away from this coalition. And then, of course, as we know, in the Reagan era, with the move towards republicanism, conservatism, war on drugs, all of the crime bill during Clinton's time in office, all this stuff. Jews were upwardly mobile and did a lot to ignore, along with many white people, ignore the problems that still face the Black community, still face not only the Black community, but also, the poor people of color in many communities. And so in the 2000s, after 9/11, there was a waking up to some extent in the Jewish community, that once again, there are people who have to get back on the street and realize that you can't rest on laurels from the 1960s. And so there was an awakening, and especially in Ferguson, after Ferguson, and the growth of the Black Lives Matter movement. There were a lot of Jews on the street in Ferguson, but at the same time, also a lot of the support for Black Lives Matter, or some, was from out of the Palestinian community. There was an overlap between those who were supportive of Palestinian liberation and supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement, and against police violence and against police departments. And Jews were somewhat, so some Jews were caught in the middle. Some Jews were supportive of Black Lives Matter, but also pro-Israel. But other Jews, especially those around Jewish Voice for Peace, and if not now, were were supportive of Palestinian liberation. And so some of the bridges around Black Lives Matter, and also in the Black Lives Matter Charter, there was one line which, out of this 40-page document, which some of the Jewish community found offensive, which was that they called the policies, American policies in the Middle East and the policies of the State of Israel, as genocidal. Back in 2010, 11. And so this caused, rather than reading the whole document, people in the Jewish community just read that one line, and this caused a rift on the level of organizations between the Black community and the Jewish community. And then since October 7th, even bridges that were built along the lines of, anti-racism, anti-white supremacy, the recognition of the rise of white supremacy and the dangers of white supremacy. October 7th helped to fray those bridges that had been recreated, partially because of the fact that the Jewish community, more people were killed on October 7th in Israel than had been killed in any other incident. Many people in the Jewish community knew people who were killed. Israel is a small country, and the Jewish community actually is a small community, and people knew people or knew people who knew people, and they were really hurting after October 7th. And some of the organizations on the left who are the obvious home for Jewish activists skipped over October 7th and just immediately went to condemning Israel's response to October 7th. Now there were so a lot of the mainstream Jewish organizations felt quote unquote betrayed. I put that in quotes because a lot of these organizations were not necessarily in line with demands of the Black activist community or the leftist Black community, the progressive Black community in general, but they were publicly feeling betrayed because of the fact that some in the Jewish community felt that they weren't given the opportunity to grieve and be angry over the fact that so many people were killed. At the same time, there were others who in the Jewish community who continued to work with both the Black community and the Palestinian community around stopping the war, further on, as time progressed, stopping the genocide, stopping the domicide, stopping the starvation. For example, the Black Jewish Justice Alliance, that Pastor Smart and Patsy and others here are part of. We put out a statement, and we had a serious conversation, put out a statement 2 weeks after October 7th, in which we both condemned the attacks of October 7th and also demanded that Israel stop the bombing then. We had no idea we could think of what might be going on, imagine what might happen, but we had no idea what Israel would end up doing, but we called for the stop to the war then. And so the relation between the Black and the Jewish communities on the institutional level are still frayed. On the personal level, I'm not sure that they are as frayed because it is organizations who are not in the mainstream, like Jewish Voice for Peace, or if not now, Black Jewish Justice Alliance, TRUA, was the Rabbinic Call for Human Rights, other organizations who are working both on this issue and on other issues together with folks in the Black activist community. Those relationships still go on. And that's also reflective of the fact that, we were talking before, Pastor Smart said he wanted me to say something about two states and peace. And it's kind of, right now, it's kind of hard to imagine anything beyond what's going on now. I mean, right now, Israel has jumped the shark in terms of peacemaking. There's a controversy about whether or not to use the word genocide to describe what Israel is doing now in Gaza. But that debate is over the technicalities of the Genocide Convention of the UN rather than the kind of cultural understanding of what genocide means. The word genocide, as well as the idea that it was important for there to be a crime of genocide to describe what the crime that a country commits when it attempts to destroy in whole or in part a people should be called. And when the definition was put forward, the Genocide Convention was put forward by Raphael Lemkin, a Jewish lawyer who lived through the pogroms and the Holocaust, his understanding of what a genocide was perfectly fits what a genocide is now. And there are many international law experts who agree that he even passes the threshold, the legal threshold. Many of them in Israel also. And even though there are some who say it doesn't pass the legal threshold, it doesn't mean that Israel is not committing crimes against humanity and war crimes. And so it's not, so conventionally, I think in terms of the way that people use the language, Israel is definitely in the process of committing a genocide. Something like 70% of all buildings in Gaza have been destroyed. All the universities have been destroyed. Most of the hospitals have been destroyed. Every time a hospital is bombed, Israel says it was a tragic mistake. At a certain point, it stops being a mistake and starts being policy. And finally, to take up Pastor Smart's challenge for what can we do. So I'm not a political scientist. I'm not a general. I'm a rabbi and a peace activist. And the first thing we have to do is follow Isaiah in beating the swords into plowshares. Rabbi Aaron Shmuel Tamaris, who was a rabbi in Eastern Europe during in the early part of the 20th century, very strongly wrote about the fact that nationalism is a new idolatry and war is its liturgy. And the only way to stop violence is by stopping violence. And the only way to stop war is by stopping war. It's not as if there are steps between the here and there. We need a ceasefire right now. We have to be out in the street. We have to be calling our Congress people to tell them to stop sending weapons of war to Israel, to stop sending the money or spending the arms industry, for those who understand it. Reverend Jim Lawson always said that, the United States is the largest purveyor of violence in the world. And part of that has to do with the fact that it's the U.S. arms industry that profits from wars. When the billions of dollars that are budgeted for Israel for war goes to American companies. Those war machines, those weapons of war are made in America. Most of them. Israel does make some weapons, but so we have to stop that. We have to stop the budgeting. We have to get the humanitarian aid into Gaza. We have to feed the people in Gaza. We have to stop the violence. And again, the bottom line is that the only way to stop the violence is by stopping the violence. Once the violence is stopped and we feed people, we can then think about final, way to move forward on a peace plan. But right now, we have to stop the violence.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that insight and that history. Thank you so much. So going back to immigration and the Immigration Naturalization Act, but immigration and others, we have Jose Ugarte. Ugarte. And Jose is currently the Deputy Chief of Staff for Councilman Curren Price. His focus is on the 28 Olympics, community development and public safety. Previously, he served as political director to then Speaker Anthony Rendon. He has been done a lot of work, consulting work, elected a lot of people to offices around the state. And he's just a good friend, good person to know, a sensitive person about the needs of our communities. And so, Brother Jose, come on. We want you to talk about the issues we talked about.
Thank you, Pastor Smart. First, good evening, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. It's an honor to be on here with Dr. Karenga, Attorney Kim, Attorney Arnwine, Rabbi Aryeh, and I think we're looking forward to KarmaNia coming up in a second. But I want to tell my story real quick. Those of you guys that don't know me, I'm an immigrant. I was born in Mexico. I think Charles Chang and Pamela Chang, I think they were on early from Immigrant Magazine. I was born in Mexico. I was born in Oaxaca, Mexico, which is an indigenous part of Mexico, southern part of the country. I came when I was 3 years old to South LA. Parents brought me here for a better opportunity, like a lot of us came. We suffered a lot. It was tough times. We had language barriers, economic hardships, and limited opportunities because of our immigration status. I remember my first interaction with a country that didn't accept me was when Prop 187 came. I think it was 1994. I was 8 years old, and I was marching the streets against Prop 187, against Governor at the time, Pete Wilson, and I realized that this country wasn't mine, or didn't accept me who I was, even though English was my first language. Even though I was educated here, even though I thought I was American, and I grew up here my entire life. I didn't know what Mexico was. I didn't know I never went back. But I realized that everybody, and was against us. And what hurt me the most years later is that it wasn't an act imposed by the governor, even though I always thought it was Pete Wilson who did it. It was an act voted on by voters. 60% of voters approved Prop 187. Prop 187 banned immigrants, undocumented immigrants, from going to public schools. At the time, I was undocumented. At the time, it would have kicked me out of public schools. It would have not got me to where I am today. I eventually became a citizen when I was 17 years old. By luck, I was under 18. My sister, who was a little older than me, wasn't fortunate as I was, but my dad just became a resident, so I applied with him, and I became a citizen just by sheer luck. Even though I always thought if they sent me back to Mexico, I wouldn't survive. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do anything in that country because I'm American as far as I know, Mexican American as far as I know. I went to college, came back, started working the labor movement. Started realizing that the labor movement is a strong immigrant supporter. A lot of us in the labor movement are fighting for immigrants' rights now. I ended up going to Wisconsin to fight Scott Walker. Scott Walker was a governor at the time that was trying to do a right to work state out there. I went out there in the middle of the winter, the SoCal kid being out there. And I realized that every immigration issues were among everything. Immigration issues were workers' rights issues, were everything that we fought for. Fast forward, now we're until 2025, 30 years after Prop 187, we're going through it again. 30 years later, we're going through it again, where our rights are being attacked again. We're seen as villains. We're seen as not American. And a lot of my friends that I grew up with are still undocumented, even though some are doctors, some are lawyers. They somehow got through the system that made it. I was lucky enough to get my citizenship, and some of them weren't. And we're in a time where we are criminalized and seen as not American. So I wanted to share my story. I know Pastor had some Smart had some extra questions for me, unless I wanted me to keep going, about who I am, what I've done, and I think the next question. Do you want me to keep going, Pastor Smart?
No, that's fine. That was more heartwarming because some other people have covered it. So that's okay. Maybe in the redo, we can, but I just think I didn't know that about your story, and I think that was so telling and important more than anything. So thank you. Thank you very much, Brother Jose. We next we have this dynamic sister that I have known all of her life, and she is a mental health therapist, an intuitive community organizer, a mediator, an energy healer, and a trauma and resilience therapist. And she tells it like it is. And none other than KarmaNia Crystal Patricia Smart. We have once my wife said that that this thing she had to finish something up, and I had to become the MC, well, the moderator. We can only allow 2 smarts on the program, so no, we don't do 3, just 2. So the one, my daughter, KarmaNia Smart.
Thank you for that introduction. Can you all
I'm
hear
sorry.
me?
Yeah, Karma, the questions I asked you are derivative of those. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Yes, I was asked to speak on the mental, spiritual ramifications of times like this from a standpoint of millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha. What I can say is that a lot of the young people that I am encountering are experiencing what Native American healing practices would call a soul death. And it's this idea that when we experience colonial violence, fascism, colonization, discrimination, all types of racial violence. And everything that we're seeing right now is that our spirit, our soul dies. And we sacrifice, what makes us us, what makes us authentically ourselves, what makes us the spirit of our culture, our people, for the sake of surviving. And when we enter fascist regimes, what it does is that it triggers a very old part of our brain and puts us in fight or flight, into survival mode. And what happens when we get into that mode is that things like identity, joy, pleasure, community, interpersonal relationships no longer matter in the same way that they did. And we hyper focus on just getting by day. And this is by design of the system, that if they can attack our economics, then we hyper focus on work and surviving and making sure we're fed and our families are fed, and don't do much outside of that. If they attack our people, then we hyper focus on our own people's struggles and not really have a viewpoint that everybody's being attacked right now. If they plant seeds of separation within the BIPOC community, then we turn against each other. We blame each other instead of blaming the bigger power that's at play, instead of blaming white supremacy, instead of blaming fascism and colonial violence, we blame each other. And another thing we do is that we hold on to the power and the privilege that we have. And so what that would look like is our own forms of internalized anti-Blackness, misogyny, classism, xenophobia, we hold on to give us some sort of power over others. And although it can feel shameful to admit this, many of us fall into this by design, that we subconsciously learn different ways of feeling inferior and superior to other people. And in times like these, we can reenact those beliefs, those subconscious beliefs, in our interpersonal relationships. And so one thing I want to focus on tonight is that I believe that the call to action is a refocus on interpersonal relationships. When I read stories about how people survived genocides, Holocaust, slavery, it was never after one big law change. It was never after one big decision made, that the people that were actually able to survive to get to see that was because of advocacy within their community, was because of other communities lending a helping hand, because they knew somebody that had a home that they could hide in, because they knew somebody that was navigating people out of the South to the North, because they knew people, they had resources of other people. And so my call to action is that I'm so grateful that we have so many people working on the front lines of legislation and social justice, that I believe that our relationships are a powerful tool of social justice. Our relationships are at the forefront of how we communicate, organize, how we have events like tonight, that it is our relationships that will save us. And it is also our relationships that are the first thing that are under attack in times like this. It makes us depressed, so we isolate. It makes us anxious, so we don't know who to trust. It makes us fearful, so we hide. And I believe that what I'm seeing with a lot of young people that I work with is a lack of sense of self and identity. and a deep sense of fear to that is causing them to assimilate into sameness. I've worked on the state university campus where I live, and it's the beginning of the semester, and I always joke that you're going to see lots of people who look alike dressed exactly the same, that they wear the exact same outfits and they look exactly the same. They have the same hairstyles, wearing the same clothes, and sometimes it's by accident, sometimes it's on purpose. And this is a physical manifestation of what I'm seeing mentally happen. That a lot of people, instead of having different opinions, instead of focusing on developing their own sense of identity and authenticity and uniqueness, are in so much fear of being different right now because they're seeing difference being under attack, that they rather be alike. And the likeness that they are following is the majority. And so a lot of young people of color assimilating the best they can to conservative ideologies, white supremacist ideologies. And this looks very, this can look very innocent at the core of it, but a lot of people in my generation, I'm seeing repeat things that like so many people have fought to get out of, believing that women aren't worth rights to their own bodies, believing that immigrants aren't deserving of the same rights of people that are born in this country, believing in certain types of conservative thinkings that's promoting beliefs and a reality that we work so hard to escape from. And so because of that, another call to action is that I just want to share the importance of having a different opinion. The importance of, even when you're in a room and you're hearing people say something and people are regurgitating the same thing over and over and it's not sounding right to you, and you have this feeling in your gut and you're like, this isn't right, this doesn't sound right, this doesn't feel right, to teach the people around you, especially the young people around you, to speak on that. That even when they feel like they might be disliked, even if they feel like they might be the risk taker, the rebel in the room, to speak on it, to be that voice, even if they're the only voice. Because 9 times out of 10, they're not the only one thinking that. They're not the only one that has to say, like, hey, like, professor, like, what you said was racist. Like, hey, what I think you are treating certain people differently. Or, hey, somebody in my friend group I think is being anti-Black. Most of the time, they're not the only ones thinking it, but to train young people to be the one that speaks up. Because those tiny microcosms that we exist in create ripple effects into our bigger society and community. And so oftentimes we want young generations, my generation, to be obedient, to fall in line, to just get with the program. And training people to have an obedient mindset makes them more susceptible to white supremacy, white conservative agendas, makes them susceptible to themselves, their minds, their bodies, and spirits being colonized. And so even if you don't like what they have to say, to train them to have the skill to speak up, to speak on their mind, even if they feel like it might be different. And so my call to action is that when you are in spaces, to focus on how can I connect with somebody in this room on a personal and authentic and vulnerable level. When you enter spaces where you are meant to be an advocate, to make sure you have the time to speak kindly to people, to leave an impression of compassion and care. Because we are all experiencing so much great pain, turmoil, and violence, respectively, and together. And it is the care of community that keeps us resilient, that keeps us strong, that keeps us hopeful. And having the skill of hope, having the skill to imagine a future that none of us have ever seen. Because I have yet to see, hear, learn about a future or a reality I want to exist in, where me as a young Black woman has all of my power and rights. And so I want to imagine a future that is fit for me and fit for people who have more privilege and less privilege than I do. And that is my call to action tonight. I appreciate listening from all of you, being inspired from all of you tonight, and sharing this space. Ashe, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, KarmaNia. Thank you. We have Patsy Ostroy here. She is a member of SCLC and the co-chair of the Beloved Community LA. Patsy,
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pastor Smart, for including me and for your friendship and that of your wife and family, which has been amazing to us. Knowing about discrimination, cruelty, and persecution was a seed that was firmly implanted in my childhood. My parents, who met in New York City, were fortunate enough to leave Nazi Germany in the mid-1930s, alarmed by the increasing signs of growing anti-Semitism, but before the Holocaust. My cousin's family was not so fortunate, and they were imprisoned in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp to be liberated eventually by the Americans. I and many other Jews saw the treatment of Blacks in America as a related scourge. It led me to show support by attending the 1963 March on Washington. 62 years ago, I was a college student, and I went to the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Attending this event marked a turning point in the civil rights movement and had a profound impact on my own perspective and understanding of the fight for equality, and probably led me to eventually have a career in law. I remember how moved I was by Dr. King's vision of a nation free from discrimination, where everyone would be judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. I also suffered anti-Semitism, was called a dirty Jew, had water balloons thrown at me as I rode my bike around the streets of the suburb of New York where I grew up. But how are we continuing to do the work? The blueprint was set for jobs and freedom in Washington, D.C. on August 28, 1963 at the March on Washington. There was a comprehensive plan for jobs and freedom. SCLC, in collaboration with our community partners, intends to follow this blueprint. On October 11th, SCLC of Southern California and Hurting and Hungry Charities, in collaboration with our community partners, is going to sponsor a job fair, which will take place at Local 721, 1545 Wilshire Boulevard, from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m. But this will not only be a job fair. It will be an opportunity to pull together and present resources and jobs to our most vulnerable. It's about making job offers available and showing that we have compassion for those who are going through a tough time, which is many people in our community. The goals of this job fair are to build community strength, standing shoulder to shoulder, neighbors shaping the future together, presenting jobs, ensuring jobs are trading opportunities. We want to prepare people on their resumes, their interviews. We're going to have experts helping people with whatever they need. Some people want jobs. Some people want healing, motivation, mental strength, and support. We want to shape the community we live in into a place we can work in, a place where everyone can thrive, not just a few. We hope that people will attend, tell other people about the job fair, people who need jobs. We will have clothes for them to wear to interviews. We'll have haircuts. We'll have maybe showers. We're working on that. And it will be a safe place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we're getting ready to wrap up, but I just want to thank everybody, and just you've been patient. So if you would like to just take 2 minutes and just tell the audience, just if you want to take 2 minutes to do a conclusion or anything, just feel free to do that. Who would like to? Okay.
You do it.
Okay. Okay. I would just simply say that we have a member, Jed, and he sent in some things that I'm going to put on our Facebook page with Ross about things you can do. But it's really, with what we're seeing in Washington, D.C., it's time for us to really get serious. And so we have to evaluate our strategies as people, not as Black people, as white people, as Jews, but we have to evaluate our strategies as a people. Are we going to continue to let the disenfranchised, the vulnerable, the meek, be treated this way in America, the elderly? So we are going to look at a way that on December 9th, I think it's December 9th, it will be the anniversary of the 60th anniversary of the Montgomery boycott, the Montgomery bus boycott. During that boycott, two important things happened. Number one, the people decided they were not going to use the Montgomery buses anymore. Number two, they devised a strategy of how they could get people to school and to work. They devised their own strategy. We're going to look at December as a month. We have to hit back, because the governor, while I don't agree with Galvin Newsom, I think it was one of the most important things to be done when he said, "You're going to do this. We're going to get 5 seats. You got to fight." It's. I don't want to say this, but we got to fight for the meek and the mild right now. And one of the things we need to do, we need to look at taking money out of the pocket of those who are getting rich. Those billionaires, we need a strategy so that we can, have a different type of holiday, a holiday where we're investing in other business and not the mainline businesses that are oppressing us. And so get ready. Some of you are going to be on the committee as we devise this strategy. But remember that Montgomery, it was I think it's 70 years. Mm-hmm. 70 years. And so now, Barbara, in Washington, you can work with us up there. 70 years, we need to come up with a strategy to move in this direction. Dr. Karinga, you raise your hand.
Yeah, I had my hand up before you started because I did want to say something, try to some of what we were doing. And I wanted to stress, I'm glad you mentioned that about the vulnerable. That's it. If you remember in my presentation, I said the first thing we have to do is reaffirm our commitment to the most vulnerable among us, right? Yes. That every sacred text that is worthy of its name always judges the moral quality of any society or any act by how it treats the most vulnerable. Everyone says, give food to the hungry, water to the thirsty, clothes to the naked, and a boat to those without one. Be a mother for the timid, a father for the orphan, a raft for the drowning, and a ladder for those trapped in the pit of despair. And so that's how we want to always think, to think about the most vulnerable among us. And then second, I argue, we've got to continue the struggle. Keep the faith, because there's so many things are happening now. You can begin to believe AI instead of yourself. So we must continue the struggle, keep the faith, hold the line, love and respect our peoples and each other, seek and speak truth, do and demand justice, be constantly concerned with the well-being of the world and all in it, and dare help rebuild the overarching movement that prefigures and makes possible the good world we all want and deserve to live in, and leave as a legacy worthy of the name of our people and human, and always stressing a shared and inclusive good for everyone, everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Karenga. Thank you all. Thank you, Brother Kim, Kim, thank you. Brother Jose, thank you. Sister Arnwine, we are in the same time zone. It's midnight, it's almost midnight here. So thank you. KarmaNia, Sister KarmaNia, thank you. Brother Rabbi, thank you so much. Sister Patsy, thank you. Brother Ross, thank you so much for always doing it, always doing it. And get ready. We'll be back on Tuesday night with the young people talking. One of the strategies is we've got to vote. And so we'll be back on. And Sister Arnwine, you might want to tell some of your folk to get on. You'll have the information there. Good night and God bless you all. I want to thank my wife who's working on this, helping me, and others. Thank you so much. God bless y'all all for being here. We've done it again. I don't know, I haven't followed the numbers because I was involved, but this will be rebroadcast because he has put it on YouTube where our file is, and so they'll be able to tune in, those who didn't see it tonight. God bless you all. Thank you.
Asante sana.
All right.
Tutaonana. Take care.